Hi everyone, this video is going to talk you through the beginning of Unit 2, Lesson 10. We're talking about what can you do to protect your data. The first thing we're going to talk about is multi-factor authentication. So if we think back to the warm-up where we talked about passwords, that's an example of single-factor authentication, right? There's one layer of protection and it's centered around something that you know. So for an example, your password. If we go and add another layer, it's called two-factor authentication. So we've still got the layer from before, something that you know. I want you to pause, and in your journal, I want you to write down, what do you think is another way to protect your data? What's another way of protecting the data that you have? Great, so I hope you came up with some ideas, and some of you may be familiar with this. You may use it on even a daily basis. Maybe you've never used it before, but if we think about something else besides something that you know, we can think about something that you possess, right? So something like a phone, right? Maybe you've been required to put in a phone number when you're getting a password authenticated, and then sometimes they send you a text or right? And that way, if somebody had your password or they were able to guess your password, right, they still wouldn't be able to get into the account and access your data because they'd need your phone, your actual phone with you as well, right? And so again, it's just another layer of protection. Go ahead and pause again and I want you to think about what are the problems with this system, right? Two-factor authentication, how could it be hacked? So go ahead and pause in your journal, write down some ideas about the problems and how it could be hacked. Great. So again, hopefully you came up with some interesting ideas, some different situations that might have happened. One thing you might have come up with, right, is that phones can get stolen, right, or SIM cards can get lost, right? These things aren't necessarily really part of who we are, the things that we possess, but we can lose them, they can get stolen, and that could be a problem with that system and our data still being vulnerable. So that leads us to, right, adding another layer, and then we call this multi-factor authentication. So we've got something that you know, your password, something you possess, example of your phone. What do you think is another layer that could be added onto these two already to add even more protection? So go ahead again and pause, journal. What do you think that other layer could be? Great. So hopefully you came up with some guess. And if you guess something physical or maybe the word biometrics, right, you're correct. So we can add in another layer, which is something that you are. And so a fingerprint is an example of this. A retina scan of your eye is another example, right? And this gives you three options. So you've got something you know, something you possess, something you are. And multi-factor authentication, as it says up there at the top, it involves at least two of these three, right? And really all three would be preferable, right? So again, that would mean if you used all three, someone would need to know your password, have access to your phone, and your fingerprint or your eye scan, right? So that's a lot of protection for the data behind those three layers. Thinking about this, right, why might this be a better system than single-factor authentication? But also, what are the challenges with the system? What are the challenges with multi-factor authentication? Is it worth any of the risks? So again, go ahead and pause these three questions, journal on them for a few minutes, and then come back when you're ready to discuss when you've finished writing. All right, great. So thinking this through, right? If you use there's lots of answers here, right? So there's lots of reasons why this might be better, and there are also lots of challenges with multi-factor authentication. One thing I'll just bring up is that multi-factor authentication can, in general, keep things better protected than single-factor authentication, but it takes a lot of extra steps, right? And that usually means more time, more money, right? So the cost of a phone, and also obviously the time in terms of getting it set up and using it. And then you can also think about, information that's part of who you are, right? Like your retina scan or your fingerprint. There are some privacy concerns with that being out there, and so we want to be thinking about those balances when we think about, is the protection that we're putting on our data worth some of the risks that might come along with that? So moving on from talking about multi-factor authentication, we want to talk about another way you can do to update your software, which is, to protect your data, which is to update your software, right? So let's just quickly review something from previously in this unit. So go ahead and just jot down or look through your notes and remind yourself, what is a computer virus? Hopefully, if you got looked in your notes and you had them, or you remember back from lesson 6, there were some examples of virus. But basically, right, a virus is a piece of code that can get onto your website, your device unknowingly, and then just like a virus that we have in our our real life, our physical lives, this virus can multiply and spread itself to other devices, other places, and so thinking about how can we protect your device from these computer viruses? What is something that you can do? Hopefully you came up with some suggestions or some things that you already do to do this, or some ideas that you have. But two things that you can definitely do is you can have a virus scanning software installed on your device, and you can also make sure that you continue to update the system software that you have on your device, right? Another way to say this is just to keep all of your software updated. So again, these two things will allow you to prevent and protect your device from those pieces of code, like we said, getting onto your device, and clogging it up, or kind of putting your data at risk. One thing that's important to note with this last point is that this is a moving process. So just like new software is constantly being developed, viruses and ways to get into that, and access it without you knowing are also being developed, right? There's constantly new threats out there, and so just installing it and updating it once isn't enough. You need to make sure that you're continuing to keep things updated as time moves along, and that you're using the best authentication practices to keep your data safe.